Hi everyone. Um, Welcome to my first episode of How to Heal, and I'm going to be talking about some very heavy subject matter. So I advise people who may feel that they are perhaps extremely sensitive to subject matter such as this to not necessarily stop listening, but to pace yourself. Okay. Um, the whole theme of these recordings is healing and how to heal, hence the title. You do not heal by dishonesty. Okay, it is my firm belief that it is law enforcement that has been instrumental in being manipulative and cagey about the racial factors in crime. And one of the ways that has manifested is, just for example, that when crime is committed by white people, then race is underplayed, okay? And when crime is committed by, for example, black folks, then race is emphasized. Whereas, in truth, the racial factors of crimes should be included, not emphasized or de-emphasized. They should be just steadfastly included because it is a factor that needs to be looked at, period. And the hyper defense of law enforcement in response to the serious issues raised by the black communities about historic and current racist police brutality, that defense of the police, to me, by predominantly white Americans, to me is evidence of the fallouts of the manipulation of by law enforcement of racial factors in crime. That there is a bit of ignorance, naivete, and illusion of police power and what that is in white American mentality and communities. You cannot heal if you are not honest, okay? And it is also my firm belief that the world is just moving forward and through. And it is Western people the world over, and that includes especially white Americans, will just be mowed over. Okay? If immigration is coming from all over the world, then on a world platform, Westerners are outnumbered by a lot. And although most people on the planet would never want to create a problem for anybody, everyone just wants to live. All right. Nonetheless, the racial factors in the fallouts of colonization, that's a big one, and other things are going to be used by individuals, particularly in power, but otherwise, are going to be used in order to create a retributive attitude towards Westerners. And that is just going to be happening more and more. However, the pattern in Western history of omitting, understandably so, to the extent that if you are the colonizer, then of course you're going to have to help, right, sort of create a bias, a positive bias towards white people, Western people in general, even if there are warring factors, competing and warring factors within white communities. Even so, you need to create a bias towards white people that is positive, and you need to create a bias towards colored people the rest of the world, that is negative. No matter what the positivity of those cultures or behavior or whatever is, doesn't matter. You have to create a bias. One of a negative bias towards them and a positive bias towards Westerners. This is a consistent pattern, and it is glaring in the hefty blood stain that is these school shootings in American history. I feel spiritually pushed to talk about the fact that just in the web search, and it's getting more and more easy to just get generalized patterns of attitudes on the internet through AI. Of course, I dig deeper than that, including and especially through prayer. But it's very, very clear that in regards to these school shootings, what the internet in general displays, which, as I was saying before, I firmly believe the source is within the powers that be of law enforcement. Okay, the attitudes, the subjects that are breached in regards to these school shootings is manipulated. Okay, highly controlled by law enforcement. The general attitude is to stay as far away as possible. There's even an enormous amount of defensiveness, it seems, about the racial factors in school shootings. Whereas just a very light search on police brutality towards black people, just for example, the emphasis on race is there on both sides. One, obviously, when it comes to the angle of law enforcement and those that support law enforcement blindly, then the racial factor is emphasized in order to downplay the black race and to sustain degrading attitudes towards the black race. And then the other side emphasizes blackness without the sort of academic, Western academic influence. The other side emphasizes race simply because that's just reality, that this is a racial, or there is a racial factor in police brutality. There is a racist factor that is entrenched. And I remember hearing actually a handful of years ago now on the radio, I listened to the whole interview. I forget the names, the different roles in Justice, but she was half black, or is a half black woman from a family of law enforcement that has a history of law enforcement in her family. And she was wonderful. I forget, she was interviewed on NPR years ago, and I thought, man, I hope that her work has been able, and her take has been able to at least have influenced some change. It's hard to see at the moment, but she talked about how if you look into the crimes, just for example, the famous shootings that were highlighted, okay, during the BLM protests and or riots, and the undue violence surrounding those, and complexity surrounding those deaths. She talks about how if you look into the different arms of justice, so everybody from the police, the officers themselves, but then the lawyers, the judges, the prosecutors. if you look, she said, if you look at the people that handle those cases, more often than not, you'll find that they are actually all family. She said it's very incestuous, The judge, for example, the judge is the uncle of the, uncle or second cousin or whatever of the officer who shot the man to death, or whatever. The prosecutor is the husband of the judge. Whatever. She said it's very incestuous. It's very family oriented. In justice, which is not surprising whatsoever to me. It may be new information to other people. It certainly was a confirmation for me, and so I'm sure this is still an ongoing problem. Hence the reason why I feel totally compelled through prayer and spirit to do these episodes, no matter how difficult it may be. Okay, everyone, without further ado, I'm going to start with the Bath school shooting disaster in Bath, Michigan. The perpetrator's name was Andrew Kehoe. Now, I think it's very important to mention that, from the outset, things look very sort of tidy. When something's too tidy, the information is too tidy, then that should raise a red flag for people. Unfortunately, it does not usually. One thing that I noticed, in particular, this subject matter, I can understand why people wouldn't want to look into it further. It's quite grisly. It's quite painful, quite shameful, On the other hand, we need to do that. And one thing that I notice about the information regarding these school shootings on the internet is it's just too tidy, That's why I've been having this theme of the thorned truth, or the thorny truth versus glamorous hardship. There is this, when people want to sort of subvert the truth, one of the things that people do is that they emphasize certain highlights of hardship. And that's what I've been calling glamorous hardship, rather than having a in-depth conversation or understanding of the truth, which is actually thorned or thorny. It's full of thorns. To navigate it takes skill. Or you'll get snagged and or cut up, scratched up, right? You have to be willing to get snagged and or scratched up a little to navigate the thorned truth, which is the actual truth, The thorned truth is not complicated. It's not complicated. It is simple if you know how to navigate it. The complication, what complicates it, is the glamorous hardship piece, is the belief system surrounding, or the perception surrounding the truth. Okay, so now this is to the best of my ability, the information that I have here on the shooters, and I'm starting with this disaster that happened in 1927. Okay, and as I was saying, the information is kind of scattered. It's fragmented. You have to navigate it. You have to know how to ask the right questions when you're searching for the information, both in prayer and online. Okay, so Andrew Kehoe's parents were of Irish descent, and they lived on a farm in the Bath Township, Michigan. He was from a very large family. He was one of 10 children. Now, of course, we are always searching for reasons behind why an individual would get to this point where they would commit such an unspeakable act. I have some answers, but again, you have to breach this topic not just with the facts. You have to breach it through prayer. You have to breach it through a deeper spiritual insight, or else you're not going to get anywhere. Okay? Facts can actually obscure the truth. True facts can obscure the truth. Eh? Right? Glamorous hardship. True facts can obscure the thorny truth. Keep that in mind. Okay. Andrew Kehoe was born in 1876, and the different factors that are listed is that apparently Kehoe in his adulthood, and he was the school treasurer, I believe. And apparently in his adulthood he had quite a lot of financial difficulties. He had a lot of debt. Apparently there was some reported health issues, including seizures and possibly mental illness. Obviously, that is an obvious factor, but reportedly, outwardly, especially in 1927, I think especially in Western culture, there's a very huge thorny history about being dishonest about health problems, especially mental illness. So that's why I say possibly mental illness. Although for us today, this is an obvious factor. There are very scant details about his neurological condition. Apparently, Kehoe had quite a lot of personal grievances. He had a lot of conflicts with local authorities. He fought with the school district over property, taxes, and school-related matters. His sense of injustice and how he felt mistreated seems to have compounded his already, it seems, quite hefty personal problems, both financial and mental. Apparently, Kehoe was reportedly rather a paranoid individual and kind of reclusive, and he was isolated. Isolated, paranoid, mental illness is really a theme, actually, in psychotic episodes of crime. So this does not come as a surprise. Although, again, the information about it is quite scant and quite cagey. I am thinking that I'm not going to go into so deeply the grisly factors of the actual crime committed, because, as I said, those things you can find fairly easily on the internet. But the factors involving the race of the shooters, the background of the shooters, their state, and that is very scattered, sort of cagey, and as I said before, you have to know how to ask the right questions in prayer and search and research in order to really find them. But I will give you a couple of outlines, okay? So on May 18th, 1927, Andrew Kehoe killed 38 school children and 5 adults. And then he killed himself. The attacks happened in a couple of stages, it seems. I asked in my research online if he had any military training. It doesn't seem that Andrew Kehoe had any military experience. Kehoe murdered his wife before he then went and committed the massacre on May 18th. He used rigged explosives to destroy buildings in the surrounding area, and then he also then detonated these same explosives, or the same kind of explosives, at the school itself. And then it looks like Kehoe also used explosives that he had piled into his truck that he then fired with his rifle, and then the truck exploded and it killed him and more children, as well as the superintendent and other adults. So this seems to be the basic outline of the tragedy. I'm sure that many people in this situation, in this terrible situation, would have thought that this was a one time happening, that this would have been a rare thing to have happened. But we would find out decades down the line, fast forward to today, that this actually happens, it seems, decade after decade. And the next shooting, the next massacre, the next tragedy would actually only happen roughly 30 to 40 years later. Which is why we need to open the conversation in this way, through honesty, through the racial factors, through the societal factors, through the informational factors that seem hell-bent on preventing conversation regarding these school shootings, these chronic school shootings. And as a result, actually prevent any conversation, any constructive and healing conversation regarding racial factors in crimes in general. So I will keep praying, and I absolutely encourage everyone to keep praying.